Welcome to Twilight Terror Stories. Twilight is not just the end of day. It's the beginning of something else. A time when the shadows stretch and fear takes its first breath. You've stepped into that moment now, and the stories are waiting. Let them find you. His eyes, captured in the rear view's small rectangle, were the first chime of doom. Not the gaze of aid, no, but the sharp, assessing stare of a hunter who'd cornered his windfall. And there I was, Eliza, tethered to a dead car on a ribbon of asphalt unwinding through nowhere. The vast, indifferent plains swallowing me whole. It began bathed in the optimism of departure. A cross-country pilgrimage toward a nascent career, my sedan crammed with the artifacts of a life shed in its skin. The sheer velocity of the open road, the scent of possibility on the wind. It was meant to be liberation. Until somewhere deep in the golden heart of Kansas, my chariot began its lament. Hours had dissolved under the wheels, the panorama an unblinking canvas of wheat stretching toward a sky too immense to comprehend. Sunset bled across the horizon, a violent smear of orange and bruised purple, just as the first metallic tremor reached me. A subtle vibration at first, nearly lost beneath the engine's drone and the radio's static murmur. But mile by relentless mile, it escalated, a frantic percussion demanding notice. I willed it away, schedule tightening like a vice, the specter of delay a sour taste in my mouth. Then the plume, stark white smoke unfurling from beneath the hood, an undeniable surrender. A curse escaped my lips as I wrestled the car onto the gravel shoulder. The tremor had become a cacophony, the engine uttering a final choked gasp before silence descended. Perfect. Just utterly perfect. Emerging into the cooling air, I flipped the hood latch, waving away the acrid ghost of burnt oil. My mechanical knowledge was rudimentary, a landscape of hoses and steel components utterly alien, profoundly unhelpful. This was dire. My phone, predictably, displayed only mocking emptiness. No bars, no lifeline. The sun had plunged below the Earth's rim, twilight swiftly thickening into a deeper gloom. The deserted highway, moments ago a symbol of freedom, now pulsed with a latent menace. A shiver traced my spine, unrelated to the evening's lingering warmth. Then, twin beams sliced through the dusk. Hope surged, a physical jolt in my chest. This wasn't the end, perhaps just a detour. I flagged frantically, relief washing over me as the vehicle, an aged pickup, slowed, its engine rumbling low, and eased in behind my stricken car. A figure emerged, tall, silhouette broad against the fading light. A tangle of beard, the shadow of a worn cap. He ambled closer, an easy grin split in his face. Bit of trouble? His voice was a low, gravelly sound. I nodded, gesturing with a helpless hand toward the still-smoking engine. It just gave up on me. Don't suppose you're a miracle worker with engines? A chuckle rumbled in his chest. Know my way around 'em, maybe. Mind if I have a look-see? I stepped back, observing as he leaned into the engine bay, probing the metallic guts with practiced hands, murmuring unintelligibly. After a few moments, he straightened, wiping grease onto faded denim. "Well," he announced, "ain't terminal. That's the good news. Bad news is, you need a widget I ain't carrying. Town's 30 miles up the road, though. Got an auto parts. Happy to give you a lift." Hesitation coiled within me. Every cautionary tale, every parental warning screamed against climbing into a stranger's vehicle on this desolate stretch. Yet the alternative, spending the night marooned, vulnerable, felt equally perilous. When might another soul pass this way? That would be incredible, thank you, I managed, forcing a confidence I didn't possess. "I really owe you one." His smile returned, but something in its geometry felt off, unsettling my already frayed nerves. "Glad to be of service. Grab your essentials, hop on in." Snatching my purse and phone, I locked the car, a futile gesture of habit in this vast emptiness. He was already settled behind the wheel, the truck's engine idling patiently. I slid onto the passenger's side, the bench seat groaning beneath me like an old man's sigh. "Name's Silas," he offered, pulling smoothly back onto the highway. "Eliza," I returned, clicking the seatbelt into place. "Seriously, thanks again. I was starting to think I'd be sleeping out here." Silas grunted acknowledgement, gaze fixed forward. "Can be a lonely road for a young lady. Never know who you might cross paths with." An inflection in his tone, a subtle weight, made me glance sideways. His profile was etched in shadow, but a faint smirk seemed to tug at his lips. Not friendly, not reassuring. Silence unfurled between us, thick and heavy. I yearned for the radio's distraction, any noise to puncture the mounting tension. Only the tire's rhythmic hum on asphalt and the frantic drumming of my own heart filled the cab. "So," I ventured, desperate to weave sound into the void, "you from around here?" He shook his head. "Nope, just drifting. Same as you." "Oh, where are you headed?" He turned then, fully facing me. In the eerie green luminescence of the dashboard, his eyes seemed to catch the light, glinting with an unnerving, predatory hunger. "Wherever the highway leads." Ice water trickled down my spine. I swiveled to stare out the passenger window, feigning fascination with the impenetrable blackness beyond the glass, hoping to conceal my escalating dread. No lights, no structures, just an endless void. We might have been the last two souls on a dying planet. And then I saw it. A detail so chilling it turned my blood to slush. We'd been driving a considerable time, easily 20 minutes, yet the numbers on the odometer remained stubbornly fixed. We weren't making progress toward any town. We were adrift, or worse. Silas," I began, my voice trembling, betraying me. "I think maybe we missed a turn. Shouldn't we be closer to town by now?" He offered no reply, merely continued driving, that same small, disquieting smile ghosting across his features. "Silas," I repeated, louder, sharper. "Did you hear me? I think we need to turn back." With a sudden, deliberate movement, his hand shot out, thumbing the power lock switch. The decisive clack echoed like a death sentence in the confined space. "Now, Eliza," he murmured, his voice dropping to a low, intimate menace. "Why would I want to do a thing like that? We're just getting acquainted." Panic, raw and suffocating, clawed its way up my throat. This wasn't real. This was the plot of a cheap thriller, a grim warning whispered late at night. Not something that happened to me, but the cold reality pressed in, undeniable. If I didn't act right now, the sunrise was a future I wouldn't witness. My gaze darted wildly, seeking purchase, seeking a weapon. My purse lay at my feet. Inside, nestled amongst the usual detritus, was the small pepper spray canister my mother had insisted upon. If I could just reach it without alerting him. "You know," Silas mused, his tone unnervingly casual, like old friends reminiscing. "Been driving this ribbon of road for years. Surprising how many pretty little things break down out here. Always so thankful for the help. So trusting." I forced a veneer of calm, needing him occupied while my hand crept, centimeter by agonizing centimeter, toward the purse. And what happened to them? The question felt like swallowing glass, but I needed the distraction. He laughed, a dry, rasping sound that sent tremors of revulsion through me. "Oh, they're still around. Pieces of 'em anyway. Fertilizing these fields, feeding the wheat that feeds the world. Kind of poetic when you think about it." My fingers finally closed around the cool metal of the canister. I drew a shaky, deep breath, gathering every shred of resolve. "You know what I think?" I said, my voice tight. He turned toward me again, one eyebrow slightly arched. "What's that, darling?" In a single, desperate surge, I brought the canister up and unleashed its entire contents directly into his face. Silas roared, a sound of pure agony and fury, instinctively clawing at his eyes. The truck swerved violently, lurching off the pavement. I threw my hands up, bracing against the dashboard as we bucked and jolted over uneven earth before shuddering to an abrupt, bone-jarring halt. No hesitation. I fumbled with the door lock, shoved it open, and launched myself out into the darkness, hitting the rough ground with bruising force. Pain flared in my shoulder, but adrenaline screamed louder. I scrambled to my feet and ran with a desperation I hadn't known I possessed. Lungs searing, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Behind me, I could hear Silas bellowing threats, vile promises that spurred me onward, but I didn't dare look back. I just ran into the consuming night. Time lost all meaning. It could have been minutes or an eternity. My legs burned, each inhale a sharp stab beneath my ribs. Only primal fear propelled me, pushing me past exhaustion, beyond perceived limits. Then, finally, blessedly, lights, a distant fluorescent oasis shimmering in the black, a gas station. Hope, potent and unexpected, surged through me. I stumbled toward its glow, toward the blessed sight of parked cars, illuminated signs. Civilization, safety. I burst through the glass door, gasping, nearly colliding with the startled, bleary-eyed clerk. "Please," I choked out, air tearing at my throat. Call the police. A man. He tried. The words fractured. The adrenaline dam finally broke, and the crushing weight of what had nearly transpired slammed into me. My legs gave way, and I collapsed onto the cool linoleum, shaking uncontrollably, consumed by sobs. The ensuing hours were a fractured montage. Police officers, questions, statements. My abandoned car located, towed to sanctuary. Of Silas and his malevolent truck, nothing. Vanished into the vast Kansas night. They promised pursuit, but the somber set of their jaws spoke volumes. Dawn painted the sky in soft pastels as I sat hunched in a booth at a small-town diner, cradling a mug of coffee long gone cold. I was breathing, alive, a survivor. Yet the world felt irrevocably altered. The open road, once beckoning with promise, now seemed laced with unseen tripwires. Every unfamiliar face held a flicker of potential threat. The landscape of trust had eroded. But alongside the fear, something else had taken root. A core of resilience forged in terror. Faced with the unthinkable, I hadn't simply succumbed. I had fought. I had escaped. Watching the sun climb higher, gilding the endless fields of wheat, I made a silent vow. Fear would not be my jailer. Caution, yes. Vigilance, absolutely. But I would not permit one man's darkness to extinguish my own spark, my belief in the possibility of good, however fragile. Later, my car, miraculously mended, hummed beneath me. I guided it back onto the highway. The road stretched onward, an unknown expanse holding both promise and peril. But now I drove toward it changed, scarred, yet somehow stronger, ready. Because sometimes the journeys that break us are the ones that reveal the unyielding strength within. And I knew, with unwavering certainty, what I was. I was a survivor. The cloying warmth drifting from the paper sack on my passenger seat spoke of garlic, oregano, and slow-simmered tomatoes, a bouquet that typically set my senses alight. Tonight, however, threading my way through the ink-dark, unfamiliar avenues of this affluent enclave, a knot of formless disquiet tightened in my gut. This delivery, mundane on its face, was unknowingly steering me toward a chasm of dread that would echo for years. My name is Leo. 6 months, I'd been running deliveries for Sal's Pizzeria, a gig that kept the lights on while I chipped away at my degree. Most shifts dissolved into a predictable rhythm. Me, my aging sedan, the sprawling tapestry of suburban addresses. But this evening deviated. The moment I eased onto the curb, the destination house declared its otherness. Set significantly back from the lane, swallowed by profound shadows, it felt less like a home and more like a secret. The porch lamp remained unlit, an anomaly for an expected delivery. Climbing the steps, a primal prickle traced my nape. Something felt dissonant, wrong. I pressed the bell. A muted, hollow chime resonated somewhere within. Silence answered. I rapped harder against the wood. "Hello? Pizza delivery." Just as resolve crumbled and the retreat to my car seemed inevitable, the door groaned inward. A figure materialized, his face a landscape half lost to the gloom. Tall, gaunt, framed by an unruly beard, His eyes possessed an unnerving intensity, seeming to pierce straight through the flimsy shield of my occupation. "Delivery from Sal's," I managed, sculpting a smile onto my tense face. "Comes to $18.50. He offered a curt nod, stepping back and gesturing me inside. Protocol screamed against it, yet an indefinable weight in his posture anchored my feet, silence and refusal. The instant I breached the threshold, the heavy door slammed shut behind me with a definitive, resonant thud. Dimness reigned within, the air stale, the furnishings sparse and spectral in the low light. He guided me toward what I presumed was a living area, though contours blurred in the near dark. "Wait here," he instructed, his voice a low, abrasive rasp. He vanished into an adjacent room, leaving me marooned, the pizza sack still clutched in my hand like a useless offering. Minutes stretched, taut and silent, punctuated only by the insistent ticking of an unseen clock. Nervous energy began to fizz beneath my skin. This strayed far from routine. I placed the pizza onto a dust-filmed table. "Sir?" I called out, my voice thinner than intended. "Your food's getting cold." Nothing. Tentatively, I took a step toward the doorway he'd melted through. That's when the soft scuff of footsteps sounded directly behind me. I spun. The man stood there, but the tableau had shifted horrifyingly. A gun rested in his grip, its dark eye fixed unwavering on my chest. My heart vaulted, lodging itself somewhere near my tonsils. "Whoa, easy," I stammered, palms shooting upwards in surrender. "Look, I don't want any trouble." "Sit," he commanded, his tone glacial, predatory. I sank slowly onto the edge of a worn sofa, my thoughts scattering like startled birds. What vortex had I stumbled into? The weapon remained trained on me, his gaze relentless. "Do you have any idea why you're here?" he inquired. I shook my head, battling to keep my voice from fracturing. No idea. Just delivering a pizza." A sneer twisted his lips. "Your boss, Sal, he obliterated my life, and tonight you become the instrument of my retribution." Sal, the affable owner of the pizzeria? What possible transgression could connect him to this gaunt specter? The man began to pace, a caged tiger clutching his weapon. He launched into a vitriolic tirade, Sal's betrayals, financial ruin, the shattering of his family. Each word dripped with venom, a corrosive blend of fury and despair. I fought to project calm, but terror coiled deep inside, sharp claws seeking purchase. Escape felt imperative, yet he was a volatile storm, armed and unpredictable. My eyes darted furtively around the dim room, searching for leverage, a potential weapon, an exit. He caught the movement. "Don't entertain foolish notions," he warned, the gun punctuating his threat with a slight wave. "You depart when my vengeance is served, not before." Drawing a ragged breath, I tried to marshal my thoughts. "Listen, I'm just the delivery guy. I'm completely out of the loop on whatever history you have with Sal. Maybe there's another way to sort this out?" He shook his head decisively, his knuckles white on the gun's grip. "No, you're merely collateral, a message. But Sal will finally comprehend the cost." He resumed his restless pacing, muttering fragments of resentment. Action, swift and desperate, was my only recourse. My gaze locked onto a substantial, heavy-based lamp perched on an end table just within reach. It represented my solitary chance. I waited, breath held, until his back was momentarily turned. Then, summoning every ounce of adrenaline-fueled strength, I lunged, seizing the lamp and swinging it in a wide, desperate arc. The solid base connected with his skull. A choked grunt escaped him as he staggered, the gun clattering to the floorboards. I didn't linger to assess the damage. Snatching the fallen weapon, its unexpected weight cold in my palm, I bolted for the front door. My hands trembled violently, betraying me as I fumbled with the lock, once, twice, before it finally yielded. I burst out into the night air, sprinting toward the sanctuary of my car, slamming the door, thumbing the locks. My fingers shook so badly that inserting the key into the ignition felt like threading a needle in an earthquake. At last, the engine sputtered, then roared. A glance in the rearview mirror captured the man stumbling onto the porch, one hand clamped to his head. I stomped on the accelerator, tires spitting gravel as I fishtailed out of the driveway and fled into the darkness. The drive back to the familiar lights of town was a blur, propelled by raw fear and the lingering surge of adrenaline. I burst through the pizzeria door just as Sal was preparing to close, startling him. "Leo, what is it? You look like you've wrestled a ghost," Sal exclaimed, his brow furrowing with immediate concern. My legs gave way, and I collapsed onto a nearby chair. Between ragged gasps, the entire nightmare spilled out. The house, the man, the gun, the terrifying accusations. Sal's face drained of color as my story unfolded, particularly at the mention of the man's grievances. "Oh, merciful God," Sal murmured, sinking heavily into the chair opposite me. "I never believed he'd escalate to this." "You know him?" The question hung incredulously in the air. Sal nodded, his gaze distant, haunted. "Silas. His name is Silas. We were partners years back, business. It ended badly, acrimoniously, but I never conceived, never imagined he was capable of this." A strange cocktail of relief and resentment washed over me. Relief that I wasn't losing my mind, that this wasn't some senseless, random violence, but a sharp spike of anger pierced through. Sal's unresolved past had nearly cost me everything. "We have to call the police," I stated, my hand already reaching for my phone. Sal nodded, appearing suddenly older, burdened. "You're right, Leo. Absolutely right. Should have dealt with this long ago." The ensuing hours dissolved into a bureaucratic haze of statements, questions, and procedural formalities. The police collected the gun, now tagged as evidence, assuring me they would locate Silas. As the adrenaline ebbed, the true weight of the ordeal settled upon me. My hands refused to still. Every unexpected sound made me flinch. Sal insisted on driving me home, his apologies a constant, low refrain. "I'm so profoundly sorry, Leo. I never intended for anyone, least of all you, to be entangled in my mess." I offered a weary nod, too depleted for words. As we reached my apartment building, Sal turned in his seat, his expression grave. "Take time off, Leo, as much as you need. Paid, of course, and if you decide this isn't for you anymore, I'll understand completely. I considered it, the prospect of navigating dark streets, approaching unknown doors, now laced with a paralyzing dread. Yet, beneath the fear, a curious ember of pride flickered. I had confronted mortal danger and emerged, battered but intact. I had faced down a man armed and desperate, and I had won. "I'll think about it, Sal," I said finally. That night, lying awake, eyes fixed on the indifferent ceiling, the night's events replayed relentlessly. Silas's shadowed face, the chilling weight of the gun, the sickening thud of the lamp. It felt disturbingly cinematic, detached from my reality. But as days bled into a week, a subtle alchemy occurred within me. The raw fear began to recede, replaced by an unfamiliar strata of confidence. I had stared into the abyss and hadn't blinked first. What else could possibly unnerve me now? A week later, I pushed open the door to Sal's pizzeria. Sal looked up from his paperwork, surprise widening his eyes. "Leo, you sure you're ready?" I nodded, reaching for the next delivery slip. "Yeah, Sal, I'm sure. But hey, next time one of your vengeful ex-partners is on the loose, maybe give the delivery crew a little heads up, all right?" A genuine laugh escaped Sal, thick with relief. "Deal." Walking toward my car, pizza sack swinging familiarly at my side, I felt altered. The night retained its darkness, the streets their potential anonymity, but the pervasive fear had been supplanted by a quiet readiness. Whatever awaited, I felt equipped. The steam rising from the bag still carried the comforting scent of garlic and tomato. But now, instead of twisting my stomach with anxiety, it smelled of potential, of a life embraced with all its inherent risks and rewards. I turned the key, the engine humming to life, and pulled out into the stream of traffic, prepared for whatever the unfolding night might hold. I wasn't just a pizza delivery guy anymore. I was a survivor. My own apartment, a space I'd chosen for its affordability and the seventh-floor vantage over the street's quiet theater, had somehow become alien territory. Unease, a feeling I never anticipated within these walls, began to coil around me. The building itself is a relic, its corridors whispering with the sighs of peeling paint, its floors groaning underfoot like ancient bones. The lift cage occasionally shudders a metallic complaint. Lobby lights pulse with an uncertain rhythm. Charming eccentricities, I'd thought, until about 2 weeks ago. Before then, the few months since moving in had passed in unremarkable peace. It began on a Wednesday, deep into the evening, perhaps 10 o'clock. Cocooned on the sofa, the living room steeped in darkness save for the television's flickering narrative, I drifted. My window frames a view across the street, a vacant lot, a square of urban emptiness. Habitually, I keep the heavy drapes drawn tight against the night, a shield against imagined gazes from the adjacent building, separated from ours by a narrow chasm. Wide enough, perhaps, for prying eyes armed with optics. Drowsiness tugged at me when the curtain near the window rippled. A phantom movement? The sealed window, the still air argued against it. True, the old wooden frame sometimes permitted slender drafts, yet never enough to stir the thick fabric with such deliberation. I silenced the television. The sudden quiet amplified my own quickening pulse. Disquiet prickled. I don't frighten easily, but the unexplained finds ways under the skin. Leaning into the gloom, I watched. Again, the curtain twitched. A distinct nudge, as if from a hidden hand, a concealed shoulder. Rising, I moved towards the window, hand outstretched. Just before my fingers brushed the material, a shape resolved itself against the fabric. Faint, indistinct, yet undeniably present. Larger than incidental clutter, darker than shadow, it possessed the vague contours of a human form dissolving into the dimness. My throat constricted, the fine hairs on my nape lifted. Intruder? The thought flared, sharp and immediate. But this was the 7th floor. Access points were limited. The front door, securely bolted, and the bedroom's small fire escape window, perpetually locked and too narrow for any adult passage without a clamor. My heart hammered against my ribs. Retreating a step, I lunged for the light switch beside the sofa. Illumination flooded the room. I spun back. The curtain hung motionless, innocent. Behind it, nothing. I swept it aside, peered out. Only the familiar streetlights painting the asphalt, the void of the vacant lot. Rubbing my eyes, I scanned the room. Corners cluttered with boxes, the silhouette of a disused lamp. Empty. Sinking back onto the sofa, I tried to regulate my breathing, shallow and tighten my chest. My phone confirmed only minutes had elapsed since the first stir, though it felt like an age. Fatigue, I reasoned. Just exhaustion playing tricks. I killed the TV and retreated to the bedroom, attempting to banish the image. Sleep, however, proved elusive. The silhouette imprinted itself behind my eyelids, a persistent phantom standing just beyond the thin veil of cloth, watching. I tossed, turned, marked the slow passage of hours, forcing my eyes shut against the imagined vigil. Morning arrived with the alarm's shriek, finding me ragged as if I hadn't slept at all. A fragile normalcy returned in the following days. Work, microwave meals, evenings spent under the glow of the television, sometimes dim, sometimes bright. The apartment felt benign once more, until Sunday. Returning from the grocery store around 6, I stepped into the living room and stopped. The curtain was disturbed, pulled back just enough to suggest someone had been peering out. A chill traced my spine. I'm meticulous about drawing them fully before leaving, especially on weekends. It's an ingrained habit. Setting down my bags, I approached the window. Outside, the street offered its usual tableau. Parked cars, strolling pedestrians, nothing amiss. I touched the curtain fabric. Cold. A knot formed in my stomach. I yanked it shut, the rings scraping along the rod, then made a circuit of the apartment. Front door locked, bedroom undisturbed, bathroom vacant, possessions untouched. Nothing else seemed wrong. I sought out Mr. Silas, the building's caretaker, a quiet man in his 50s often seen sweeping the halls or monitoring the lobby. I explained my concern, the possibility of an intruder. He listened, face impassive, assuring me no unauthorized individuals had passed his watch. Could the lock be faulty? He shook his head, mentioning his checks of entrances, stairwells, the elevator cameras. Nothing. No one, he insisted, had breached my apartment. He turned away then, murmuring something about the building's age before shuffling off down the corridor. paranoia began to take root. Leaving for work became a ritual of locking, checking, rechecking the door before summoning the rattling lift. Evenings commenced with an immediate, anxious glance towards the window. Sometimes the curtain remained sealed. Other times, a sliver of glass was exposed. Not daily, but frequent enough to fray my nerves. I devised a small test, a piece of clear tape affixed across the curtain's edge. 2 days later, I returned to find the tape lying on the floorboards. Impossible. No draft possesses such strength, such focused intent. I spoke to Mr. Silas again. A sigh, the same reassurances. No unusual activity observed, no unauthorized access. He swore by the lobby security. I examined the window frame minutely. No scratches, no splinters, no sign of tampering. One night, I attempted a stakeout, settling onto the sofa in the dark, television muted, waiting. Silence reigned, at least while consciousness held. I startled awake near 2 a.m. The curtain seemed parted. A definite gap gleamed faintly in the ambient city light filtering through. My heart leaped. A cold sweat broke out on my arms. Scrambling up, I flicked on the lights, wrenching the curtain fully open. Nothing. The street below slept. Was I sleepwalking? Losing my grip? These weren't issues I'd ever known. A cheap webcam, perched on my desk and aimed at the window, became my next resort. I let it record through the night. Reviewing the footage the next morning yielded mostly static darkness and my own restless movements before bed. Then, fast-forwarding, I caught it. Around 3:15 a.m., a subtle shift in the fabric. The resolution was poor, grainy, yet undeniable. The curtain moved, pushed gently from behind, consistent with the pressure of a hand. A single, deliberate motion, then stillness. My stomach plummeted. I replayed the segment again and again. Not imagination. Something had been there. I presented the footage to Mr. Silas. A shrug, a draft, perhaps, the building settling. These old windows, he offered. Sometimes air gets trapped, moves funny. I pointed out the shape, the suggestion of fingers. He stared blankly at the small screen, then at me, promising only to keep a closer watch on the hallway cameras. Frustration gnawed at me. Moving, breaking the lease, options demanding funds I didn't possess. Explaining this to anyone, my boss included, risked sounding unhinged. I resolved to handle it myself. I scoured my apartment, every square inch, probing walls, checking fixtures, searching for hidden cavities, secret passages, relics of the building's past, perhaps. Nothing. I even pressed along the hallway walls outside my door, seeking loose panels, anomalies. The building was old, yes, but seemingly solid. And still, the curtain moved. Some nights brought quiet, others a flicker of motion glimpsed peripherally while watching television. A swift turn of my head always revealed stillness. Once, returning from the kitchen after fetching water, having left the living room dark, I found the curtain drawn back a full foot, as if someone had boldly leaned out to survey the street. My heart hammered violently. My hands trembled as I seized the fabric, yanking it shut. My mind raced, a frantic search for logic, for reason, finding none. An inexpensive motion sensor, ordered online, was my next defense. Positioned near the window, it chirped obligingly when I tested it. For several nights, silence. Then, a Thursday, near midnight, a soft beep emanated from the living room. I was in bed, half asleep. The sound jolted me upright, skin prickling, a cold sweat tracing my spine. I snatched the baseball bat from the closet and burst into the living room. The sensor's light glowed, but the room was empty. The curtain hung perfectly aligned. Bat raised, I scanned the shadows, listening to my own ragged breathing, the refrigerator's low hum. Resetting the sensor, I confirmed its function. It beeped when I moved near, fell silent when I stepped away. I stood by the window, pressing my forehead to the cool glass, watching the indifferent street. A few distant lights glowed in the building opposite. No one watched back. A car swept past below. The microwave clock read 12:07 a.m. The silhouette behind the curtain haunted my thoughts, a presence I fought to dismiss, though my body remained coiled with tension. That weekend, desperation drove me to seek counsel from neighbors, usually solitary figures in this building. Ms. Anya, in 704, roused from apparent weariness, reported nothing unusual, though she mentioned the building's notorious wiring issues might render security cameras unreliable. Small comfort. Leo, down the hall in 710, offered historical tidbits, the building's former life as a hotel, lingering odd fixtures in some units, but denied any experiences mirroring mine. His gaze held a pitying skepticism. I retreated, feeling the walls of my isolation press closer. Returning to my apartment, I found the curtain gaped open again, perhaps an inch. Mail slipped from my numb fingers onto the small entry table. I stared at the narrow breach, chest tightening. I closed it, then performed the now familiar ritual, checking under the bed, behind the sofa, in closets, the small utility space. Nothing. A tension headache pulsed behind my eyes. Sinking onto the sofa, I rubbed my temples, grasping for any rational thread. None came. Noticing my rapid breath, I forced myself into slower, deeper inhalations. An experiment. I left the curtain wide open, daring it to move under observation. While I chopped vegetables for dinner, I cast frequent glances towards the window. The heavy fabric hung inert. Later, attempting sleep, the familiar chorus of the old building began. Floorboards settling, faint creaks from the living room. Usually ignorable. Now, each sound snagged my heightened nerves. Lying rigid in bed, I stared towards the bedroom door, its outline faintly visible in the sliver of street light piercing the blinds. My heart thumped a heavy rhythm. An hour passed in this state of hypervigilance before I surrendered. Rising, I illuminated the entire apartment, inspecting the window once more. The curtain remained exactly as I'd left it, wide open. A wave of foolishness washed over me. Then, as I turned back towards the bedroom, a distinct brushing sound whispered against the fabric. I froze, spun around. Stillness. Approaching the window, I peered out into the quiet street, the dark facade opposite. My own reflection stared back, weary and anxious. A sudden buzz from my pocket made me flinch violently, merely a spam text. Hands trembling, I extinguished the living room lights, retreated to the bedroom, locked the flimsy door behind me, and left the bedside lamp burning, seeking solace in its small circle of light. Saturday morning, around 2, I awoke with grim resolve. Mr. Silas agreed I could change the locks, provided I bore the cost. That afternoon, armed with a new lock set from the hardware store, I performed the installation myself. A small measure of control, perhaps, though it offered no answer to the fundamental mystery. The caretaker's insistence that no duplicate keys existed, no unauthorized entries occurred. Still, I fortified my defenses. New lock, checked window seals, a small rubber wedge jammed under the base of the front door. That night, sleep felt fractionally less precarious. The illusion shattered the following day. A brief trip for groceries, and upon return, the curtain parted. 2 inches, maybe more. My throat closed. The new lock gleamed untouched. The wedge sat undisturbed. I flew to the window, yanked the curtain shut, gripping the fabric until my knuckles whitened. My pulse throbbed in my ears. Then a faint click sounded from the vicinity of the kitchen. I whirled, adrenaline surging. Silence descended again. Fists clenched, I crept towards the kitchen. Only the refrigerator's hum. I searched drawers, cupboards under the sink. Pristine. No forced entry, no footprints, no broken glass. Nothing. Back in the living room, I collapsed onto the sofa, staring at the window, a storm of fear and impotent rage brewing within me. I fantasized about tearing the curtain down, boarding up the window, but knew it solved nothing. It would only blind me to the presence when it chose to reveal itself again. So now, I exist in this state of perpetual vigilance. Each homecoming is tainted by suspense. Will the curtain be drawn aside? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes a fleeting movement dances at the edge of my vision. Always, upon checking, emptiness awaits. Mr. Silas maintains his mantra. No one enters unbidden. The other residents deny any involvement. Every recourse feels exhausted. Locks, sensors, cameras, searches, vigils. All that remains is the shaky webcam clip, a dubious fragment of proof. Every evening, my eyes fix first on the curtain. Closed brings a shallow breath of relief. Open invites the familiar plummet of dread. I don't comprehend the how or the why, only the unnerving certainty that something watches, something moves within my sealed space. I remain, enduring day by uncertain day, hoping for cessation, for revelation. But all I have is a remembered silhouette in the gloom, a silent curtain's inexplicable dance, and the chilling conviction that I am not alone. Here, on the 7th floor, each stir of fabric makes me freeze. Listen, watch, and wait. Twin beams sliced the deluge, painting streaks of light on the rain-slicked void of the highway. Water fell not in drops, but in solid curtains drumming a frantic rhythm on the roof of my old sedan. A rule etched in stone: never stop for strangers. Yet the tempest raged, a primal force that clawed at conscience. How could I condemn someone to this elemental fury? That single fissure in my resolve, a hairline crack born of misplaced empathy, would soon shatter everything. Work had bled the day dry. Home beckoned, a sanctuary of lamplight and paperbacks, a refuge from the clamor. Then the sky ruptured. The familiar artery of the highway became a desolate ribbon swallowed by the downpour, utterly devoid of other travelers. Through the frantic sweep of the wipers, a silhouette materialized at the road's edge, a figure, sculpted by rain, arm angled skyward in desperate hope. Sodden, clinging fabric outlined a human form. A flicker of pity, unwelcome but insistent, stirred within me. No soul deserved exposure to such a night. The hiss of tires on drenched asphalt marked my surrender as I eased onto the shoulder. He scurried towards the car, a hunched shape battling the gale. I leaned across, pushing the passenger door open, an invitation into the relative calm. Gratitude, he breathed, shedding rivulets onto the worn upholstery. the scent of rain and damp earth filling the small space. Thought I'd drown out there for sure. Understandable, I managed, the word tight in my throat, a knot of nascent disquiet already forming. Where are you headed? Just ahead, came the nebulous reply, his chilled hands chafing together, seeking friction, warmth. Truly, I owe you. I offered a non-committal nod and merged back into the liquid night, the metronomic pulse of the wipers the only conversation between us. Stolen glances revealed him younger than the rain had first suggested, mid-20s perhaps, dark hair slicked to his brow, a rough shadow of beard clinging to his jawline. His gaze, however, was a frantic hummingbird, never lighting anywhere for long, darting around the cabin's confines. So, I ventured, aiming to puncture the thickening silence, what strands a man on a night like this? A beat of hesitation stretched before he answered. Engine gave up the ghost. Miles back. Phone's dead to the world, no signal out here. Plausible, yet. A dissonance hummed beneath the words, a subtle off-key note, the averted eyes, the faint quaver threading his voice. Paranoia, I chided myself. Just the storm rattling my nerves. Rough luck, I offered. Good timing on my part, then? A ghost of a smile touched his lips, brief and thin. Fortunate. Silence descended again, heavier this time, charged with unspoken tension. I felt the weight of his stare, a physical pressure on the side of my face, though his eyes still wouldn't meet mine directly when I risked a glance. The fine hairs on my nape prickled. My knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Mind some music? The question cracked the quiet, desperate for static, for any noise to fill the void. Suit yourself, he murmured, his voice flat. As my hand reached for the radio dial, the dashboard's weak luminescence caught it. An irregular darkness marring the fabric of his jacket sleeve near the cuff, deep, viscous looking in the dim light, the color of shed life. My blood went glacial. An injury sustained during the breakdown, or something far more shadowed? Breathe, Elara, just breathe. Keep the tremor from your voice. So, I began, the sound alien in my own ears. Where exactly is just ahead? He shifted in his seat, a subtle movement, but his right hand drifted towards his inner jacket pocket. Keep the wheels turning, he commanded, his voice stripped bare of gratitude, now glacial, sharp as broken glass. You'll know when we're there. The realization struck like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. Not stranded, dangerous, perhaps hunted, and I, his unwitting chariot on this storm-lashed, deserted stage. My mind raced through impossible scenarios. Fight him? He was larger, stronger, and that pocket held unknown menace. Intentionally wreck us? At this velocity, a coin toss between salvation and oblivion. Listen, I pleaded, striving for a calm I was far from feeling. No trouble needed here. Name the spot, I'll drop you off. We can just forget this happened. A bark of laughter, utterly devoid of humor, scraped the air between us. A bit beyond that point, wouldn't you say? You've already looked behind the curtain. My throat constricted, dry as dust. I saw nothing. I lied, the words tasting like ash. Don't know you from Adam. Let me pull over right now. We both just walk away. Admirable effort, Silas countered, and from his pocket slid the unmistakable, slender form of a switchblade. The metallic click of the blade springing free echoed, deafeningly intimate in the car's confines. Afraid this particular journey isn't concluded just yet. Then the icy kiss of steel pressed against the side of my throat. Checkmate. Instinct screamed louder than fear. My foot slammed the brake pedal with all my strength. We were thrown violently against our restraints, the world tilting, inertia fighting mechanics. A searing line of pain bloomed on my neck where the blade grazed, but adrenaline drowned it instantly. Park engaged. A desperate lunge for the door handle, futile. His grip, iron-like, clamped onto my arm, wrenching me back into the seat with bruising force. A raw scream tore from my throat, swallowed immediately by the tempest's roar outside. "Silence!" he snarled, the knife pressing harder, a chilling promise of finality. Another peep, and I open you up from ear to ear. Terror, absolute and paralyzing, locked my limbs. Lightning strobed outside, painting his face in demonic relief for fractions of seconds, eyes blazing with a terrifying, unhinged energy. He was capable of utter erasure. Now, his voice dropped, low, lethal, you will drive, and you won't deviate, not an inch, until I permit it. Do you understand me? A jerky nod was all I could manage, my own body feeling distant, puppet-like. Trembling fingers found the gear shift, eased the car back into drive, back into the relentless flow of the storm and the unknown horrors ahead. We plunged deeper into the suffocating night. My thoughts fractured, scattering like wind-blown debris. Images of faces I loved, the crushing weight of their never knowing, of my simply vanishing into the rain. The cold steel remained against my skin, a constant, intimate reminder of the precipice. His directions came curtly, diverting us from the main highway onto veins of asphalt barely visible on the map, roads that bled into deeper, more profound isolation. With every turn, the faint glow of civilization receded behind us, hope dwindling like a guttering candle flame. Please. The word was a threadbare whisper, barely audible above the engine and the rain. Let me out here. I swear I'll vanish. No one will ever know. That chilling laugh again, grating against my nerves. Still clinging to illusions, Alara. There's no rewind button on this. Not for you, not for me. A choked sob escaped my lips as the abyss of his intention opened fully before me. This wasn't about a ride, or money, or escape. This was something final, something absolute. Was I truly trapped, powerless? Then, rounding a treacherous bend, the road slick with accumulated rain, inspiration sparked. Desperate, perhaps fatal, but decisively mine. A deep inhalation, steeling frayed nerves against the potential cost. In one convulsive, fluid movement, I wrenched the steering wheel hard right. The world dissolved into a maelstrom of violence and noise. We shot off the tarmac, tires screaming uselessly on sodden earth. A sickening lurch, then the brutal embrace of gravity as the car tumbled. Once, twice, a third brutal rotation grinding metal and shattering glass, before slamming to rest upside down in the muddy ditch. Pain flared everywhere, a blinding, comprehensive agony. The coppery tang of blood filled my mouth, my vision blurring, swimming. But air filled my lungs. I was alive, and the knife's pressure was gone. Fingers, thick and unresponsive, fumbled frantically with the seat belt catch. A low groan emanated from the twisted metal beside me. Silas, time evaporating. Click. The buckle released. I dropped heavily onto the car's inverted ceiling. Ignoring the symphony of agony protesting every movement, I scrambled towards the spider-webbed ruin of the passenger window. Rain hammered down relentlessly as I hauled my broken body through the opening, collapsing into the churning mud outside. Behind me, within the wreckage, the distinct sound of struggling, curses muffled by bent metal and deployed airbags. No hesitation. Run. My legs felt like anchors forged of lead, each breath a fresh stab wound in my ribs, but I ran. Into the deluge, into the sucking mire, skeletal branches lashing like whips as I plunged headlong into the black, dripping embrace of the woods bordering the road. A distinct shatter of glass echoed behind me. He was out. "I'll hunt you down." His voice, distorted by rage and the storm's howl, pursued me through the trees. Nowhere left to hide. Panic lent impossible wings to my battered feet. Deeper into the dripping labyrinth I fled, directionless, propelled only by the primal terror of the hunted. The ancient trees loomed, silent, indifferent witnesses to my flight. Every shifting shadow pulsed with menace, every rustle of unseen life a potential end. Time stretched, warped, lost all meaning in the consuming darkness and rain. Then, through the skeletal trees, light, a fluorescent oasis shimmering in the wasteland of night, a gas station, and probably close. Fueled by the last sputtering dregs of adrenaline, I stumbled from the tree line, across the slick, wet asphalt, collapsing against the glass door of the convenience store. The attendant's face, initially bored, registered disbelief, then wide-eyed alarm, taking in the wreck I presented, mud-caked, bleeding, trembling uncontrollably. "Help!" I choked out, the word ragged, torn from my raw throat. "Police! He's coming!" As his hand reached urgently for the phone beneath the counter, my legs finally gave way entirely. I slid down the cool glass to the cold linoleum floor, the fight draining out of me in one immense, shuddering wave. Safe, relatively safe. Distant sirens began to keen, growing steadily louder, slicing through the rain's unending roar, a promise of arrival, of sanctuary. Only then, hearing that rising, hopeful wail, did I truly draw full breath. The longest night had ended. I had surfaced, but the phantom pressure of the blade against my skin, the echo of that chillin', humorless laugh, the fleeting image of a face illuminated by lightning. These ghosts would ride with me now, unwelcome passengers etched indelibly into the landscape of memory, forever haunting the rain-swept highways of my mind. This patch of earth whispered disquiet from the instant my boots touched its soil. An unassuming facade, the homestead, weather-beaten farmhouse, field surrendering to wild growth, belied the knot tightening in my gut since day 2, since the ground itself gave way beneath the derelict barn. No official survey, no county map hinted at the warren beneath, and the townsfolk. Blank stares or hurried evasions met my inquiries. Now, ensnared, I grapple with a subterranean enigma that refuses static form, shifting like dream logic beneath my feet. Solitude was the currency I sought, a quiet expanse for my endeavors, far from prying eyes. My needs were simple. Yet the earth itself conspired against simplicity, a peculiar subsidence near the small barn, not the clean dip of a sinkhole, but a ragged wound in the soil beckoned investigation. Peeling back, the loose loam revealed a maw, a hand-hewn passage plunging into darkness, wide enough to swallow a stooping man. Hesitation warred with a strange compulsion. A faint, cool exhalation sighed from the opening, carrying the scent of stagnant time and leaving a coppery film on my tongue. Logic argued retreat. Instinct, perverse and insistent, urged me forward. Armed with a torch beam and a flimsy dust mask fetched from my truck, a cursory look, I promised myself, a fool's bargain, I descended. The air grew instantly chill, clinging damply. Walls of raw earth, scarred by primitive tools, swallowed the light, showing no hint of shoring or modern craft. My torch carved a fragile bubble of light from the oppressive blackness. Each scuff of my boot birthed a phantom echo, a mocking counterstep trailing just behind, perpetually out of sync. My pulse hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a primal drumbeat reminiscent of childhood basement terrors. I fought the urge to constantly glance over my shoulder, attributing the dislocated sounds to aberrant acoustics, yet the unease clung like cobwebs. Deeper in, perhaps 30 yards along, the earthen walls gave way intermittently to patches of crumbling brick or crudely fitted stone, whispering of forgotten purpose. Etched symbols, too deliberate for chance scratches, triangles, circles, geometries I couldn't decipher, marred the surfaces. Running a gloved hand over them revealed shallow, uniform grooves. My phone, useless without signal, captured only blurred phantasms where the inscriptions should have been, despite its usual low-light competence. Frustration gnawed. Then a bifurcation. One path sloped down into deeper gloom, the other veered sharply left. As my light stuttered, a premonition of darkness tightening its grip, I resolved to withdraw, but turning, I felt it. An icy caress on my nape, intimate as breath, yet utterly vacant when I spun, torch slicing through empty air. A weakness invaded my knees. Retreat became a scramble, back towards the blinding, blessedly real sun. I emerged coated in grime, sweat chilling my skin despite the subterranean cold. That evening bled away in fruitless searches through county ledgers, yielding nothing on subterranean anomalies. A query to a taciturn neighbor I'd encountered earned me a sideways glance and an abrupt shift in conversation. Sleep offered little refuge, haunted by the imagined scrape of earth beneath the floorboards. Dawn found me procuring better armaments: a high-lumen torch, spare cells, a robust lantern, coils of rope, a notebook for charting this unmapped territory, an arsenal against the unknown, a futile grasp for control. Ignoring the persistent thrum of apprehension in my chest, I slipped back into the earth's embrace. The initial passage felt familiar, the air thick with dust motes dancing in my beam, my own respiration loud in the stillness. I anchored the lantern near the entrance, a flickering sentinel, and began paying out the rope along the wall, a lifeline against the encroaching dark. Perhaps 15 minutes along, the familiar dissolved. The fork I remembered, the downward slope, the leftward turn, had vanished. In its place, the tunnel arced smoothly to the right, a seamless, undeniable alteration. My rope, my supposed anchor to reality, snaked into this new configuration as if it had lain there always. A prickling unease crawled over my skin. My palms grew slick. How could solid earth reshape itself? Panic simmered. Pressing onward, I sought the familiar glyphs. They reappeared yards later, incised more deeply, their edges sharp, almost recent, beneath my gloved fingertips. After some time navigating this altered route, a capricious draft stirred the heavy air, now warm, now chill, ghosting across my arms. The fine hairs on my neck lifted as a sound brushed the edge of hearing, a sibilant whisper shaping my name. Silas. So faint, I almost dismissed it, but it came again, a dry rustle. Silas. My stomach clenched. Torchlight stabbed the emptiness. Who's there? My voice fractured, echoes tumbling over themselves in mocking reply. Silence answered, thick and waiting. Sweat beaded on my brow. Curiosity, a dangerous addiction, pulled me onward. Ahead, the passage widened into a chamber, perhaps 10 feet across, ceiling low overhead. Every surface writhed with inscriptions, rows upon rows of the strange sigils. Circles, triangles, jagged forms pulsed in the torchlight. In one corner, the earth bore a dark, indelible stain, as if saturated by some long-dried fluid. Kneeling, my light swept across the far wall, revealing yet another opening, leading deeper still. Rising, the sensation of unseen eyes intensified. My torch flickered, a dying pulse mirroring my own erratic heart. I tried sketching the route in my notebook, a crude map against the chaos, but my bearings were lost. Had I turned right once? Twice? The corridor seemed to twist around me, tangling my memory. My head throbbed. A faint, rhythmic clicking echoed from behind like fingernails tapping stone. I spun, beam slashing the darkness. Nothing. The sound ceased, leaving a silence that pressed heavy on my ears. Enough. The rope, my lifeline. Time to get out. The tension knotted my shoulders into painful lumps. 5 minutes of backtracking along the cord led not to the familiar passage, but to an impassive wall of packed earth. Solid, impenetrable. My light played over its surface, finding no seam, no irregularity. The rope vanished directly into it. A surge of raw panic jolted through me. I yanked the rope, it held fast, then abruptly slithered free from within. The wall, loose in my hand, its other end seemingly dissolved into the soil. A strangled cry escaped me, swallowed by the strange acoustics. My path back was gone. sealed as if it had never existed. No choice but forward. Back in the chamber, I forced down water, the coolness doing little to quell the frantic drumming in my chest. I took the other opening, the one leading deeper. A faint, metallic tang, the scent of old blood or rusted iron, tainted the air. My stomach churned. Soon, the ceiling descended, forcing me into a crouch. The passage narrowed, scraping my shoulders. My free hand traced the walls. Rough earth, cold stone, patches of unnerving dampness that numbed my fingertips. Rounding a bend, a glimmer pierced the gloom. Not my torch beam, but a weak, ethereal luminescence, pale blue and pulsing softly from further ahead. I doused my light. The glow persisted, emanating from a hairline fracture in the wall near the floor, as if a sliver of captured starlight were embedded there. Reaching, I hesitated. The light seemed to quiver, to breathe. I recoiled. Nearby, almost hidden, yawned a fissure so narrow I'd have to turn sideways. Claustrophobia tightened its icy fist around my ribs. Get stuck. Die here? But the way back was sealed. As I began to inch through, shoulders grinding against cold earth, a low rumble vibrated through the ground. A subterranean growl. The fissure opened into a slightly larger space. I straightened, gasping, light sweeping the walls. The familiar glyphs were here too, but magnified, gouged into the stone with savage force. A heavy pressure built in my ears, the weight of the earth above. Then, impossibly close, a dry whisper breathed against my ear. Silas. I roared, "Stop!" Whirling around, beam cutting empty air. My light caught frantic scuff marks on the dusty floor, the signature of something heavy dragged away. Panic gave way to instinct. A subtle current of air, cleaner, cooler, brushed my cheek from the right. An exit? Hope surged. I followed it to a steep incline of loose soil. Scrabbling upward, torch clamped between my teeth, tasting grit and metal, hands digging for purchase, sliding back, scraping flesh. Agony and desperation fueled the climb. Near the top, a sliver of light, true daylight, filtered through a tangle of roots. With a final lung-bursting effort, I clawed through the opening and collapsed onto damp leaves at the bottom of a shallow ravine. Gasping, limbs trembling, I oriented myself. I was nowhere near the barn, a half-mile distant at least. The hole I'd emerged from was a dark slit beneath thorny bushes, offering no clue to the impossible distance traveled underground. The long walk back to the farmhouse was a trial of trembling legs and frayed nerves, every rustle of wind in the trees a potential threat. I reached the porch, still clutching the torch, its beam extinguished hours ago, a useless talisman. Dirt caked my skin, my throat raw. What is this place? The question hung unanswered in the quiet twilight. It remains unanswered. Each descent confirms the madness. The labyrinth reshapes itself. My maps are fictions by the next day. Markers I leave are swallowed or transplanted to alien corridors. The whispers persist, coiling around my name in the dark. A presence, unseen, unheard, save for those sibilant breaths, stalks my steps. These are not mere tunnels dug by human hands. This place beneath my land possesses a consciousness, a shifting, malevolent awareness. It draws me back again and again. I bought this land for peace, but I inherited a prison, and it knows I'm here. It seems cruelly intent on reminding me I'm never truly alone. The first tremor of the unreal arrived on a Tuesday morning. I, Elias, was navigating the deeper labyrinth of the stacks, a cart laden with brittle periodicals trundling before me on my customary shift at the library. The familiar scent of decay and dust hung thick, everything steeped in normalcy until my gaze dropped to the floor. Nothing lay beneath me. I stooped, peering intently at the worn linoleum tiles bathed in the stark overhead fluorescence. Yet my own umbra had deserted the floor beneath me. Straightening, I scanned the aisle. The towering shelves, too, stood stark, unburdened by shadow, the light settling upon the spines of ancient books with a strange flat quality. A prickle of ice traced my spine. I propelled the cart and myself out of that aisle with undue haste, retreating to the circulation desk, the mundane anchor of daily logs. No word of this slipped past my lips. The desire not to appear unhinged to my colleagues warred with the burgeoning unease. Yet the image persisted, and later, drawn by a morbid curiosity, I revisited the exact spot. The phenomenon held: light without consequence, floor without shadow. A curious buoyancy invaded my limbs, distinct from illness or vertigo. My breath seemed to escape me quicker, shallower. The overhead lights emitted a faint, anemic resonance, weaker than memory suggested. My heart began a frantic drumming against my ribs. My palms grew slick with a sudden dampness. 10 seconds, perhaps, I stood there, suspended in that anomaly, before fleeing once more. The remainder of the day became an exercise in feigned normality, assisting patrons with obscure references, reshelving returned volumes, the tinny chime of the telephone, all performed under the shadow of that shadowless moment, replaying itself behind my eyes. This library, this venerable institution, is a creature of age and sprawling corridors, entire wings dedicated to forgotten manuscripts, maps bleeding ink onto parchment, reference tomes thick with the dust of disuse. Certain sections slumber, rarely disturbed by footfall. Whispers circulated, of course, tales of migrating books, spectral flickers in the lighting, echoes that answered no call from the subterranean levels. I'd always relegated these to the library's own folklore, content in my quiet profession, comforted by the scent of aging paper. But the aisle stripped of shadow felt different, tangible, undeniable. Dawn brought resolve. After clocking in, ensuring my absence from the front desk wouldn't be immediately noted, I journeyed down the main artery of the library toward the restricted zone housing the most ancient texts. I hesitated at the threshold of that specific aisle. The low thrum of the lights seemed to vibrate in the stillness, illuminating motes performing a silent ballet in the stagnant air. A tightness constricted my chest. I stepped across the invisible line. My eyes remained fixed downward, searching for the return of my absent shadow. It refused to appear. I waved my hands, raised them towards the looming shelves, form without darkness, movement without consequence upon the brightly sterile floor. The wooden shelves themselves cast no relief, no dark outlines against the wall behind. The light was uniform, pervasive, wrong. I swallowed against a dry throat, felt the cold dew of sweat bead on my forehead. My purpose sharpened. Find an explanation, a label, anything. Deeper I walked, scanning the faded gilt on countless spines. A small metal plaque, tarnished almost to illegibility, caught my eye on one shelf. Tracing the faint indentations with a fingertip, I felt the gritty resistance of accumulated grime. From this shelf, layered thick with dust, I drew forth a random volume. Bound in scuffed, dark leather, its title was a mere ghost on the spine. Carefully, I opened it. The pages exhaled a dry, ancient breath, yellowed and brittle. The text within was handwritten, a script of sharp, unfamiliar characters belonging to no language I could place. A dull ache bloomed behind my orbits as I strained, instinctively trying to decipher the indecipherable. A wave of nausea churned in my stomach. I slid the book back into its slot. My arms felt strangely weak, a subtle tremor beginning in my fingers. Logic scrabbled for purchase. Faulty wiring, unannounced renovations in this forgotten corner. Implausible. The library seldom lavished attention or funds on the manuscript archives. As I turned to leave, a susurrus, like breath shaping my name, brushed the edge of hearing. Elias. Too faint, too uncertain. I froze, pulse leaping. My gaze swept the silent stacks, the empty perspectives between shelves. No one. The hum from the lights seemed marginally louder now, or perhaps it was the blood roaring in my ears. I listened, straining, but the whisper did not repeat. Forcing my limbs into motion, I walked away, acutely aware the tension knotting my shoulders, the echo of each footfall in the resonant quiet. Back in the main thoroughfare, Anya from periodicals waved, asking about misplaced archival boxes. "No," I managed, my voice emerging thin and reedy. I cleared my throat, attempted a smile, and offered no explanation for my tremor. The break room offered sanctuary, cool water, and a moment to wrestle my breathing back under control. My heart still hammered a heavy rhythm against my ribs. My shirt felt damp beneath my arms. For several days, I charted my course through the library to give that particular aisle a wide berth. Courage failed me, but the memory gnawed, especially in the quiet hours of the night. Lying awake, staring into the darkness above my bed, I'd recall the unnerving lightness, the floor stripped bare of my shadow. Goose flesh would ripple across my skin. One part of me yearned to erase the experience, dismiss it as a trick of perception. The other, stronger part, craved understanding. Eventually, it won. One evening, shift completed, armed with a sturdy flashlight, I returned. The library was settling into its pre-closing hush, vast and echoing. Reaching the threshold, I clicked off the flashlight, testing the ambient overheads. Still, no shadow fell from my form, though the bulbs glowed steadily. The dancing motes seemed finer now, less substantial. My stomach clenched. A faint acidic taste rose in my throat. Raising a hand before me, I watched the space where its silhouette should have fallen upon the linoleum. Only unbroken brightness, shimmering slightly. Sweat bloomed anew on my palms. I extracted another tome, this one thick-spined. Flipping through its pages revealed calligraphy that shifted, morphing between unrecognizable alphabets, some lines bold, others fading like whispers. My eyes began to water with the effort of focus. Footsteps, I thought, behind me. I spun around, heart seizing. Emptiness greeted me. My breath came in ragged bursts. My attention shifted to the small wooden door at the aisle's terminus. A storage closet, perhaps holding a fuse box, some mundane explanation. It was locked. The metal knob felt unnaturally cold beneath my fingers. Kneeling, I peered through the keyhole. Impenetrable darkness. Standing, I ran my hand over the door's rough, unfinished surface, searching for any identifying mark. Nothing. Then the whisper returned. Elias. Closer this time, unmistakably my name, seeming to originate from the air just behind my shoulder. A full-body jolt. My mouth went instantly dry. I took a slow step back, the solid wood of the door a meager anchor against my back. My legs twitched with the instinct for flight, but I held my ground, straining to perceive any other presence. I paced the aisle, a slow patrol, scanning every shadowed recess between the towering shelves. The overhead lights maintained their steady, shadow-banishing glare. My own footsteps sounded muffled, absorbed by the peculiar stillness. I swiped sweat from my brow. A sharp report, like stressed timber yielding, cracked from behind a nearby shelf. I snapped the flashlight beam into the gap. Only the dusty flank of the shelving unit, a few loose yellowed pages scattered on the floor. No lurking figure. The frantic thudding in my chest filled my ears. Clicking the flashlight off again, I reassessed the ambient light. It seemed dimmer now, the illumination weaker, less certain. My arms felt lighter still, threatening to float. I drew a ragged breath, then another, fighting for composure. My knees felt unstable, unreliable. I retreated into the main corridor, the squeak of my shoes on the tile sounding unnaturally loud. Substance returned to me. My faithful shadow reappeared on the polished floor beside me. A small tide of relief washed through me, though the trembling in my hands persisted. I hurried home. The ensuing week saw me delving into the library's own dusty annals, searching the internal database for any mention of that aisle. I unearthed references to ancient manuscripts, a donation from a private collector decades past, accompanied by cryptic notations regarding specific atmospheric requirements for storage, but nothing more concrete. No records of maintenance peculiar to that section, no lighting experiments logged. Tentative inquiries put to older colleagues met with blank stares, swift changes of subject, or vague recollections of rumors about difficult texts best left undisturbed. One gave me a long, searching look and simply said she'd heard it was a place best avoided. Yet I couldn't stay away. Curiosity, or perhaps something less rational, kept pulling me back. Each visit took me a fraction deeper into the rows of silent watchers. More volumes opened, more pages turned. The very ink seemed fluid, refusing allegiance to any single tongue. Sometimes a wave of dizziness would force me to brace myself against a shelf. Sometimes peripheral flickers, like phantoms dissolving upon attention, teased the edges of my vision. The silence in that aisle possessed a unique quality, heavy, yet paradoxically making me feel lighter, the air thin, rarefied. My breathing would quicken involuntarily. My mouth would parch. My hands, perpetually damp, would seek the rough fabric of my trousers. One evening, I lingered too long. Closing time approached. The remaining staff were consolidating near the main entrance. I felt compelled to push further, to finally witness something definitive. I hefted a particularly large manuscript onto the small wooden table against the far wall. Neither table nor I cast a shadow in the strange, sourceless light. The hum above seemed a constant, low throb. I turned the pages, my hands shaking, the ancient paper whispering its fragility. The script here was darker, bolder than in the others, possessing an almost impossible freshness despite its evident age. Leaning closer, a profound chill radiated outward from my chest. My arms began to tremble violently, my vision momentarily blurred. I pressed a hand to my sternum, trying to calm the frantic bird beating within. My name, Elias, spoken with unnerving clarity, materialized beside my ear. I whipped around. Still nothing. Who's here? The words were a ragged whisper in the heavy silence. No reply. An overhead bulb flickered once, twice, then steadied. My stomach plummeted. Carefully closing the manuscript, I returned it to its place. My left foot had gone numb, a pins and needles invasion. Taking a few steps toward the exit, I paused. A disembodied lightness possessed me, as if my physical self were merely a suggestion within my attire. A faint ringing commenced in my ears. I stood frozen, forcing measured breaths against a rising panic, heart hammering, sweat tracing a path down my temple. One step, then another, focusing on the distant archway marking the aisle's end. Each footfall felt uncertain, the floor subtly swaying beneath me. The corridor beyond looked impossibly long, dim. Reaching the brighter expanse of the main hall, I glanced down. My shadow lay faithfully beside me. Relief, potent but fleeting, washed over me. My hands still shook. I clocked out without a word, detoured to the break room for water, gulped it down, and fled the building. Sleep offered no refuge that night. Restlessness plagued me, my mind trapped in a loop of shadowless floors and whispered names. Around midnight, I rose, drank more water, and knew I needed a different approach. A physical explanation, perhaps. Something quantifiable about the light, the wiring, the very air. The next day, I resolved I would bring a camera. Arriving an hour before my shift, a small digital camera clutched in my hand, I made straight for the aisle. Silence reigned, broken only by the low electrical thrum. I pressed record, panning the lens across the floor, my feet, the shelves, capturing the stark illumination. On the small screen, the scene replicated itself. Bright light, absent shadows. My own image appeared washed out, indistinct, the edges blurred. My heart stuttered. I continued filming, my breathing growing shallow, my eyes darting nervously into the depths between the stacks. After perhaps a minute, I paused the recording to review. My chest tightened. The footage stopped abruptly around the 15-second mark. The device had simply died, screen plunging into blackness despite a fully charged battery. I tried again. The same result. 15 seconds of recording, then shut down. The battery indicator now flashed a defiant red. A curse escaped me. I smacked the camera's casing in frustration. Useless. The lens retracted with a soft whir. Pocketing the inert device, a fresh wave of fear, cold and sharp, washed over me. Sweat prickled beneath my collar. Defeated, I approached the table again, opening one of the manuscripts I'd previously examined. My arms felt leaden, shaky, but I forced my gaze onto the script. The characters seemed bolder now, darker than mere hours ago. Page by fragile page, I turned, the crinkle of paper loud in the oppressive quiet. Every nerve felt stretched taut, anticipating the next whisper. My shoulders ached with sustained tension. A faint rustling sound near the floor drew my eyes downward. A miniature vortex of dust spun lazily about my shoes, though no draft stirred the air. My heart hammered against my ribs. A throb started behind my temples. This was too much. Closing the heavy book, sliding it back onto the shelf, I began to back away. As I retreated down the aisle, the air seemed to thicken, grow heavier. My footsteps sounded loud, intrusive. A faint pop occurred in my right ear, like pressure equalizing. The moment I crossed the threshold into the main corridor, I felt it. A return to solidity, to normalcy. My shadow stretched long beside me. My arms tingled strangely. Then my phone shrilled in my pocket, making me jump. It was Anya. My shift had started. I was late. Mumbling an apology, I hurried towards the front desk. The rest of that day passed in a haze of anxiety. Checking books in and out, fielding inquiries. My body performed the motions, but my mind remained trapped in that silent, shadowless aisle. By shift's end, I felt utterly depleted. Home, a long shower, then bed. But sleep was fractured by nightmares that left me drenched in sweat, gasping in the dark. The image of the swirling dust motes clung persistently. My chest felt bruised, constricted, as if from holding my breath for far too long. The following afternoon, I sought out Mr. Abernathy, the head archivist, catching him in his office near the administrative wing. I broached the subject tentatively, mentioning anomalies in the old manuscript section. He frowned, his gaze sharpening. "What sort of anomalies, Elias?" I tried to articulate it, the vanished shadows, the peculiar quality of the light, the sensation of weightlessness. He regarded me with undisguised suspicion. Had I been unwell? Under undue stress? I shook my head. His demeanor shifted, became stern. He didn't want me exploring areas outside my designated duties. I was to adhere to my routine tasks. His tone, the careful way he avoided my eyes, hinted at knowledge withheld, but I lacked the fortitude to press him. That evening, I returned one last time. An irresistible compulsion drew me back, a desperate need to find something, anything, overlooked. My legs felt unsteady as I walked beneath those buzzing lights. The air thinned again, leaching strength from my muscles. I glanced at the silent sentinels lining the shelves, the heavy manuscripts brooding in the unnatural brightness. The wooden table at the far end stood stark, shadowless. I swallowed hard. And then the whisper, directly beside my ear. "Ass." The sound stretched, thin and weary, yet terribly insistent. My skin crawled. My body jerked involuntarily, and the flashlight slipped from my grasp, clattering dully on the linoleum before spinning to a halt. The whisper coiled around my name again. My heart felt like it might rupture my chest. My mouth was utterly dry. Bending to retrieve the flashlight, my hand trembled so violently I could barely close my fingers around it. I forced myself to look, to scan the aisle with the beam. Nothing. No one. Yet the presence felt suffocatingly close. My lungs seized. Breath hitched in my throat. My pulse thundered, a deafening roar in my ears. Reaching out, my fingers brushed the nearest shelf. Rough wood, thick dust. Elias, fainter now, dissolving into the background hum. I couldn't endure another second. Turning, I walked, quickly, purposefully, out of the aisle, out of that zone of wrongness. My chest ached. My throat felt raw. I didn't look back. A strange, tingling sensation persisted on my skin all the way to the main doors. Outside, the evening colors seemed unnaturally vivid. the fading sunlight warm and grounding on my skin. I drew long, deliberate breaths. I still work at the library. I maintain my distance from that aisle, charting wide arcs around it, and thankfully, no assignment has forced my return. I shelve books in sunlit corners, assist patrons with contemporary queries, cling to the mundane surfaces of the building. But sometimes, inevitably, my gaze drifts towards the corridor leading to those ancient manuscripts. My stomach twists into a cold knot. The memory of weightlessness returns, the feel of silence pressing in. What slumbers within those unreadable books? What power bleaches the shadows from existence there? These questions remain unanswered, festering. My name, whispered in dreams, still jolts me awake sometimes, drenched in sweat, legs aching as if from a long, desperate run. I tell myself I will not go back. I tell myself it is over. But deep down, I doubt my own resolve. That place exerts a subtle gravity, a persistent pull on my thoughts. I harbor the certainty that its silence is merely patient, that its claim remains. Passing the entrance to that corridor, I feel a tension gather in my chest, sense the very air shift, as if something vast and unseen waits just beyond the threshold, holding its breath. For now, I continue my work, hoping avoidance is enough. But I know it is there, and I suspect it is not finished with me. Silence should have owned the first night in the Thorn place. Instead, a ripple of laughter, thin as spun glass, shattered it. Children's laughter, though Iris and I possessed none. We were newly nested within these walls, the ink barely dry on the deed to the old farmhouse, perched solitary on its swell of land beneath brooding, time-gnarled maples. Weather-beaten timber sighed around us, the porch a skeletal embrace encircling the structure. A bargain, they called it. Ms. Albright, the agent whose eyes never quite met ours, practically vibrated handing over the iron key. A house with character, she chirped, her smile stretched, a brittle thing. You'll find your peace here, I'm certain. Lying awake now, the phantom mirth echoing from unseen corners, certainty felt leagues away. My elbow found Iris's ribs. Listen. I breathed into the dark. She surfaced slowly from sleep, a murmur. Listen to what, Leo? Just like that, the laughter dissolved, leaving only the venerable groans of timbers settling deeper into the earth. A trick of the tired mind, perhaps. Nothing, I conceded. A dream, I suppose. But the waking world proved stranger than any dream. In the weeks that unfurled like slow, gray flags, the uncanny became commonplace. A book migrating overnight from shelf to sill, cutlery rearranged in its drawer, and sudden, inexplicable pockets of impossible winter that bloomed in hallways, stealing breath even as sunlight streamed through the window panes. Always, underpinning it all, the laughter, sometimes distant, a mere shimmer on the edge of hearing. Other times, disconcertingly close. Iris, ever the pragmatist, wove explanations. Lapses in memory born of settling in, drafts inherent to antiquity, the acoustics of the countryside playing tricks with sounds from afar. I clung to her logic, wanting its anchor, yet a deeper current pulled at me, whispering a wrongness. The turning point arrived a month deep into our tenure. I was wrestling with the last vestiges of our packed lives in the attic, a dust-choked throat swallowing the afternoon light, when my fingers brushed against something recessed. A loose floorboard yielded, revealing a small leather-bound volume beneath. Its cover, cracked and faded like old skin, seemed to breathe secrets. Curiosity, sharp and insistent, compelled me to open it. Within, a script like frantic insect legs sprawled across the brittle pages. Deciphering it sent ice sluicing through my veins. This was the chronicle of Elspeth Thorne, the woman who, alongside her husband Josiah, had raised these walls over a century before. What she recounted was a tapestry woven with dread. The land itself, she wrote, was soured. Elders of a displaced native tribe had implored Josiah not to build upon this ground, calling it a place of passage, thin-veiled between worlds. Josiah, a man carved from stubbornness, had waved away their pleas. Initially, tranquility reigned. Then, the children began to alter. They drifted inwards, whispering to companions unseen, lost in games played out in vacant rooms. Elspeth documented the disembodied laughter, the spectral movement of playthings, the fleeting dark shapes glimpsed in her periphery. And then, the vanishing. One child, then another, claimed by the house, by the land, until none remained. The final entry bore the date 1920, Elspeth's hand unsteady, the words a near illegible scramble. "They beckon me now," it read, "their laughter fills my ears. May Providence absolve us for our trespass." I snapped the journal shut, my pulse hammering against my ribs. A fabrication? Some elaborate, cruel jest left by predecessors to unnerve the newcomers? Yet, as I stood rooted, the attic air plunged colder still, and a distinct child's giggle seemed to prick the space directly behind my ear. I didn't descend the attic stairs. I tumbled, escaping the suffocating weight of the past. Iris was in the kitchen, the scent of roasting vegetables a fragile shield of normalcy. She hummed softly, a counterpoint to the frantic rhythm in my chest. The scene felt false, a stage set. "Iris," my voice emerged, a ragged edge. "The house. We need to understand what this place is." I spilled the story, the journal's grim narrative, the curse Elspeth described, the lost children. Her face, illuminated by the setting sun through the window, lost its color. Doubt warred visibly with the fear she'd so carefully contained. "Leo," she began, her voice hushed. "I think I've caught sight of them. Sometimes." She confessed then to the peripheral phantoms flickering in mirrors, the unnerving prickle of unseen eyes when she knew she was utterly alone, the dreams where children's voices pleaded from shadows, begging her to join their play. We sat shrouded in a heavy silence, the weight of Elspeth's century-old terror settling upon us. What recourse was there? Seek out arcane remedies? Flee and foist this poisoned inheritance onto some other unsuspecting souls? Before thought could solidify into action, the kitchen lights stuttered, died, then flared violently. The temperature plunged like a stone dropped down a well, our breath misting in the suddenly frigid air. And the laughter erupted, no longer faint or distant, but a cacophony erupting from the walls themselves, from above, from below. A tidal wave of childish glee turned monstrous. Iris's fingers clamped onto my arm, nails biting. "Leo," she choked out. "Out! We have to get out, now!" We surged towards the front door. The knob turned, but the wood held fast, sealed by an invisible malice. The back door, the same. Windows rattled but refused to yield. Even the cellar hatch felt welded shut. Louder swelled the laughter, now interwoven with the patter of unseen feet, with voices calling, seductive and terrifying. "Come play," they chimed. "Stay forever." We retreated, cornered animals, into the living room. Horror held us captive as the house turned fully against us. Books launched themselves from shelves like projectiles. Furniture scraped and skidded across the floorboards, propelled by nothing visible, and ceaselessly the voices beckoned. It was Iris, her eyes wide with terror as a wingback chair hurtled past who saw it. A glint on the mantelpiece. An old stone point, dark and smoothly shaped, likely unearthed from the surrounding fields, kept as a relic. "The journal," she gasped, breathless. "She wrote it was sacred ground. Perhaps—" Understanding flared. I lunged, snatching the arrowhead just as an intangible force seemed to tug it away. The instant my skin contacted the cool stone, a profound shift occurred. The airborne objects clattered inertly to the floor. The riotous laughter ceased, leaving a silence so abrupt it rang in the ears. The oppressive cold lifted. We didn't pause to question the reprieve. The front door swung open with effortless ease, like an exhaled breath. Still clad in the day's clothes, clutching the arrowhead like a talisman, we fled into the deepening twilight, the car engine roaring to life, carrying us away. We drove, putting miles, then states, between us and the Thorn place. We never returned. Professionals were hired, instructed to pack our lives and list the property, the arrowhead, and Elspeth's journal explicitly included. We insisted, vehemently, that the house's shadowed history be disclosed. Last we heard, it lingers on the market, described by some optimistic agent as a period property awaiting restoration, steeped in local lore. Iris and I know it only as the nightmare we barely escaped. Sometimes, in the deepest hours of the night, I jolt awake, certain I hear the faint echo of children laughing. Here, cocooned in the city's ambient hum, the proximity of neighbors a comfort and weight, I can usually dismiss it as phantom memory. Usually. We rarely speak of the events within those walls. It's simpler to frame it as a shared delusion, stress manifesting as spectral encounters. But the truth resides beneath, an unspoken covenant of fear. The questions remain, sharp-edged and unsettling. Why were we chosen? What power truly resides in that soil? And the children? What became of their stolen lives? Answers feel eternally out of reach. Perhaps it's better so. Some thresholds are best left uncrossed, some silences undisturbed. All I truly know is this: should your travels lead you down a quiet country road, and you spy a lonely farmhouse dreaming under ancient trees, offered for a song seeming almost too perfect, drive on, keep driving, because you cannot know what waits within, laughing softly in the gathering dark, eager to bid you welcome. A dry crackle shattered the morning's hush, the sound alien amidst the birdsong. Leo and I froze, porcelain mugs hovering, our eyes meeting across the weathered planks of the cabin porch. We'd sought refuge here, a pocket of silence away from the clamoring world. Yet the world, heavy-booted and unwelcome, had tracked us down. This haven, tucked deep within forested hills miles from anywhere resembling a town, was meant to be ours alone. No signal bars, no digital tethers, just the symphony of the wild. Clara had unearthed it online, a spontaneous booking for a long-awaited respite. Exactly right, she'd declared, her gaze luminous with anticipation. No noise, no demands, only us. I'd readily embraced the promise, desperate to shed the weight of deadlines and the city's relentless thrum. For 36 hours, perfection reigned. We'd explored winding trails, plunged into the glacial clarity of the lake, and rediscovered the ease of conversation on that sun-drenched porch, laughter echoing as it hadn't in years. Now, rough voices bled through the surrounding pines, puncturing our fragile bubble of peace. "You heard that?" Clara whispered, her mug landing unsteadily on the railing, a tremor in her hand. I gave a curt nod, thoughts scattering like startled birds. Hikers, perhaps? The owner making rounds? But a creeping wrongness permeated the air, a sudden, watchful stillness in the woods that belied innocent explanations. "Inside," I murmured, voice tight. "Bolt the door, I'll see who it is." Clara started to argue, but a sharp, metallic snick, the unmistakable sound of hardware engaging, silenced her. We melted back into the cabin shadows, easing the door shut with excruciating care. Peering through the window pane, I saw them. 2 figures emerging at the clearing's edge, swathed in camouflage, faces obscured by dense beards and the low brims of their hats. "What do we do?" Clara breathed, barely audible. I shook my head, adrift. No cellar, no hidden exits. Just thin wooden walls that suddenly felt utterly inadequate against the menace outside. They were closer, their words now distinct, carried on the unnervingly still air. "Told you, saw something," one insisted, urgency roughening his voice. "Looked like a person." "Best hope not," the other growled back. "Can't afford witnesses." Ice formed in my veins. Witnesses? To what dark transaction had our search for solitude led us? Clara's fingers dug into my arm. She pointed towards the cabin's rear wall, where a small high window offered a sliver of possibility, our only route. Moving with ghost-like quiet, we snatched essentials: inert phones, a flashlight, a water bottle. While Clara wrestled with the stubborn window latch, my gaze swept the room, searching for anything resembling a defense. A heavy, cast-iron skillet hung near the stove. Meager, but solid. Tangible. The window groaned open, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the suffocating tension. We froze, straining our ears. Outside, the voices had ceased. "Go," I hissed, cupping my hands to give Clara a boost. She wriggled through the narrow aperture, landing with a muffled thump outside. I passed her the meager supplies before levering myself through the opening. Halfway out, the cabin door crashed inward. "Hey," barked a voice, "got runners." Raw adrenaline ignited within me. I tumbled out, the rough sill scraping my back, landing hard. Clara hauled me upright, and then we were simply running, consumed by the forest. Branches whipped our faces. Unseen roots clawed at our ankles. Behind us, the crashing pursuit, the angry shouts receding slightly as we gained ground. We ran until our lungs screamed for air and our legs turned to stone, finally collapsing behind the broad trunk of a fallen giant, gasping raggedly. Think we lost them," Clara panted, her face flushed, streaked with grime and fear. I nodded, unable to speak, my mind a chaotic whirl. Who were they? What unsanctioned business unfolded in these woods? And the most terrifying question, how did we escape this alive? As our breathing steadied, the forest's familiar chorus tentatively resumed. Birds calling, leaves whispering. It was almost possible to pretend the last half hour was a fever dream. But the fire in my muscles, the cold knot of dread in my gut, were undeniably real. "We have to keep moving," I managed, my voice raspy. "Find the road, find help." Clara nodded, her eyes wide, mirroring my own fear. Which way? I'm completely turned around. I retrieved my phone, a useless reflex. Still dead, but the compass icon glowed faintly, a digital ghost. The access road was east, I recalled. Head that direction, we have to hit it eventually. A flimsy strategy, but the only one available. We pushed onward, navigating the dense undergrowth with as much stealth as our trembling legs allowed. Every snapped twig, every rustle of unseen life sent jolts of panic through us, freezing us in place. Each time, only a squirrel, a fleeting bird. An eternity seemed to pass before a new sound reached us, the low, distant rumble of an engine. Hope surged, potent and fierce. A vehicle meant a road meant civilization, rescue. We crept closer, drawn towards the sound, but the hope curdled as we peered through a screen of leaves. A larger clearing lay ahead, occupied by a scene that turned my blood to sludge. A dozen men, maybe more, swarmed around several heavy-duty trucks unloading wooden crates. Their contents remained hidden, but the context painted a grim picture. This wasn't some petty crime. This was organized, resourced, and lethally serious. Clara stiffened beside me. "Leo, we have to go," she urged in a desperate whisper. "Now." Too late. A sharp cry split the air. "Over there! Movement!" We bolted. Stealth dissolved into frantic flight. We crashed through foliage, heedless of tearing clothes or stumbling feet. Behind us, the sounds of the hunt erupted. Shouts, snapping branches, the sporadic crack of gunfire biting into nearby trees, spitting splinters. My lungs burned, legs screamed, but primal terror propelled me onward, the image of capture a horrifying spur. We burst from the tree line onto a rutted dirt track. Left, it curved away. Right, perhaps 100 yards distant, a bridge spanned a deep, shadowed ravine. "The bridge!" Clara gasped. "Underneath, maybe we can hide." A gamble. If they searched below, we'd be cornered. But the alternative, continuing this desperate race, felt impossible. We sprinted towards the structure, the shouts of our pursuers terrifyingly close. Reaching the abutment, I helped Clara scramble down the steep, loose embankment, then slid after her, finding refuge in the cool, concrete shadows beneath the bridge deck. We pressed ourselves flat against the support pillar, struggling to muffle our ragged breaths. Heavy footfalls pounded on the wooden planks above. Voices echoed, sharp and agitated. Couldn't have gone far. Spread out. Check the woods across the creek. What if they went down the embankment? My heart hammered against my ribs. But then a new voice, clipped and authoritative, cut through the noise. "No time for this. Buyers due any minute. If they ran, they ran. Deal with it later. Everyone back to the trucks. Move." Muttered objections followed, but soon the voices receded, replaced by the growl of engines starting, fading into the distance. We remained frozen in our hiding place for what felt like an age, silence stretching taut between us. Finally, when only the natural sounds of the forest remained, I risked a whisper. "Gone, I think." Clara nodded, her face pale, tear tracks etching paths through the dirt I hadn't seen her shed. What now? I drew a deep, shuddering breath, forcing clarity through the fog of fear and exhaustion. "Follow the road," I said at last. "Stay in the trees, parallel to it. It has to lead somewhere eventually." It wasn't a plan born of confidence, but of necessity. As we clawed our way back up the embankment to the road's edge, the enormity of our predicament struck anew. Lost, hunted by ruthless criminals, utterly isolated. Our survival hinged on nerve, endurance, and a desperate hope for luck. Yet, looking at Clara, seeing the flicker of steel beneath the fear in her eyes, I found a fragile ember of resolve. We faced this together. Together, we had to find a way through. We began walking, keeping to the concealing edge of the woods. Each step carried us further from the immediate nightmare, closer, I prayed, to safety. But the real journey, I knew, was just beginning. Even if we escaped these woods, we carried a lethal secret, a truth that dangerous men would silence at any cost. Our tranquil weekend escape had warped into a brutal fight for life, a fight I was fiercely determined to win.